So tell me about your own formal or informal entrance into the business. Where did the crack open for you? What was it because of what you wrote about The Graduate? Was that the beginning that brought you to Hollywood and opened you into the movie business? But you had been in the movie business in the sense that you were a movie critic way earlier on, and you were hanging out with the movie people and
Yeah, yeah, but
producers.
then
and
there
directors.
then there was you know, a long period where I was now trying to be a screenwriter, and
Where were you when that started? What were you doing? At New Yorker or?
yeah, I was a journalist, and as you said, I was a film critic for a few years. But when I was kind of identifying as a screenwriter, I was well, I wasn't anywhere near as successful at that. I mean, I wasn't a complete washout, but I was far from the top.
Okay, so what was it that you started with?
So there was a lot of shame in that, Phil. You know, there was a like feeling if I were to say I'm a screenwriter, and you know, I'm having dinner with people who get paid 20 times what I get paid.
Yeah, I remember it well. I remember the shame. I felt the same way for years about being not being a novelist. You know, that I was so successful in so many other things, and journalism,
Yeah.
whatever I touched my
Yes.
hand to was a success, and I could have gone on up to, you know, magazine business or whatever, up the New York papers or something. But I never wanted to do that. I just wanted to become a novelist, and it wasn't happening, and that was very shameful. Yeah.
But I mean, you really had a sense of what the top thing was. The top thing for you was being a novelist.
That's right. That's
and
exactly.
everything else was maybe it was for money.
Well, journalism was not for money. I mean, it was a life work for me, journalism, but it was also it was what I kept as a job to make money in order to live, because I had a family. You know,
Of course.
I had 2 kids in those days, and one day I had 3, and
Understood.
and no more money coming in, and a lot of money going out, and so. Anyway, but you know, when you got onto the shame of it, it brought me back to that, and in the movie business, I went through that myself. You know, writing, just deciding. One day I anointed myself as I'm going to write screenplays. I'm going to learn how to write the
Well,
screenplay.
what you said was that you were kind of in training to be a director. You felt in order to make money in movies and have any respect, you had a screenwriter got no respect in the Rodney Dangerfield way, and you had to become a movie director.
Well, it looked like that was the way it was going. I mean, the writer was going to be irrelevant out there, and if it wasn't already,
Right.
But the
Exact.
director was everything.
Exact.
And if you were going to be creative in this business or in any business relating to it, theater or whatever, you had to become the person who's in charge in the movies. It was the director, and
Yeah.
so.
Well, what happened with
Well,
you? With
that
you,
was a false.
it was a
false
plan.
premise.
It was an idea of a moment that never really.
Well, I thought about it. I don't know, year or two or something. It was in the back of my head. And, you know, like at that same time when I was a movie critic at this time,
Right.
and I was just so.
I mean, that was the way you did it. That was like the French way. You became a critic,
Yes.
and then you found your way into being a director.
That's the way I thought it might happen. And Norman Mailer, for instance, in that period,
Right.
he made 3 movies.
Right.
4. I don't
Sure.
know how many he made. 3. And he actually followed through on what was in the back of my head, and it was that time, you know. I mean, people like Ingmar Bergman were stars of greater magnitude than a lot of writers. As far
Absolutely,
as I
it was like
concerned. Fellini
and
and Buñuel. I saw every movie that Buñuel ever made, and same with Fellini. I'm still catching up with it.
yes.
too.
I mean, at that moment, and I mean, you had been going to the movies since you were a little kid.
Right. 5 years old, I'd figure it out.
I started going to the movies in college for one reason or another, but it was at that moment when you could say it was a moment when young people thought they were going to change the world, but movies were certainly part of that. They were important. They were much more than movies. They were. I mean, it's impossible to say how important they seemed then, and that feeling, I think, for people who started then, that feeling has continued, even though movies are so trivial compared to what they were then, or what they seemed to promise then. And I'm talking about the '60s.
Yeah, in those days, I mean, movies were just great entertainment in the 30s and 40s for me, but in the 50s, when the Europeans kept coming in great numbers. And the Japanese Kurosawa's movies,
Right.
And Buñuel's and Antonio.
You were waiting for the next Fellini, the
Absolutely.
next Antonioni, the next Truffaut, the next Godard. You couldn't wait to see the next one.
Well, and those directors were stellar figures. I mean, I wanted when I went to.
They were huge,
when I
just
went
absolutely
to,
huge.
Sweden. I had a book published in Sweden, and the publisher said, "What do you want to do when you're in Sweden?" I said, "I want to meet Ingmar Bergman."
Right, of course.
And I did.
Yes.
We spent a great couple of hours together.
Wow.
And we saw his version of King Lear, and it was a fantastic meeting. We had a great time with him. But it was but that was the way I felt about him and his work, and Fellini and his work, and Buñuel and his work, and I wanted to see everything that they wrote, just the same as I wanted to read every Hemingway story and
Yeah.
every scrap of information about Hemingway or Faulkner, Fitzgerald, and Saul Bellow.
What a moment that was, and it didn't
Joyce.
really last. It didn't really last that long. I mean, in a way that idealism still lives in one's heart, but in reality, no. It was a moment in time.
Yeah, it was more than a moment. I mean, it was a couple of decades, I think, but
Oh well, I don't think it was that long, but
it's not there anymore. It doesn't seem
Right.
to me.
it's long. It's a memory now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm talking about now the 50s, 60s, 70s, and into the 80s.
Yeah.
When I was in the 80s, when I went to Sweden, and I still felt that same reverence for those. I mean, it hadn't faded in me, but
Well, you were working with Francis Coppola, who was like
another
because of what a gigantic titan in the whole history of movies. He was still doing something in the 80s, which basically, except for him, had disappeared by the 70s. It was gone. Then it was only Francis, because he was such a high roller.
He's still a high roller.
Yeah, what an amazing figure he is.
Yeah, he is. I agree. I agree. I mean, he's working on a project now called Megalopolis. It's a thing he's been doing for something like 20 years.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's written more than 100 scripts for this by himself. Well, he and I worked on a Cotton Club together, and we wrote 40 scripts for that. But 100, more than 100. I mean, probably it's 120 or 130. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean,
thinking about Cotton Club, we were talking about this the other day. This phenomenon of the director and the writer are staying up late at night and really flying this movie by the seat of their pants in a way that just. I mean, as Schrader kind of says, that could come to exist again, but basically it hasn't existed for the last 40 or 50 years. That phenomenon where the writer and the director are making decisions that are changing the trajectory of the whole picture, just the two of them before sunrise.
That's what we did. We worked, one more time we worked 34 hours in a row to get the script out. And we didn't sleep. I mean, we took cat naps here and there.
You told me this marvelous story about Richard Gere, who both of us worked with in this day, but where Gere says, "There's no script, I'm not acting."
Right, and I was typing the script as fast as I could type, and I was rewriting the whole script because Francis had interpolated something new into the script, and it was very difficult to figure it out, but we were figuring it out. And then Francis went off because he was going to shoot the movie the next morning.
Right.
And so I stayed up, and I kept. I mean, I'd been working all day, and I started into the night. And Richard had told everybody up front that if there was no script by 2:00, he was leaving. And
yeah.
Came 2:00, he left, and I was still typing. But the script wasn't finished. I mean, it was so.
How did he get cajoled to come back on the set?
I worked until about 5:00, I think, and then and the script was finished, and it was on the. I think we started at 9 or 8 or 9. I don't remember what the first shoot was, but instead of Richard's shots that morning, they moved over and Gregory Hines and
right.
They did a scene with him where he's
sure a dance scene,
and a song, and the Tall, Tan, and Terrific or something.
Right.
Anyway, it was a new scene, but the script was there, and people were saying, "Oh, yeah, the script looks pretty good," you know. And so that was the way it was. And Richard came back the next day or the day after. I don't remember exactly how that worked out, but he was in his rights. I mean, it was the way we were working, and it was it was crazy. But it was a crazy time. It was a crazy.
It
movie
hasn't
to work
existed
on.
until now. It maybe it will happen again. Although, as Schrader said, the difference is now nobody's getting paid,
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
and in the same way, no
Yeah, Schrader
critics are getting paid either.
You can make a movie from nothing, or you can make it, make a $2 million movie for $50,000 if you can get the 50, and you can do it yourself.
And then the 50 is
But
gone.
the 50 is gone. and you lose
Exactly.
the 50.
That you're out 50.
So times are changing, and here's Brendan. Here is my son. He's a movie maker, making a movie out of us right here now.
Maybe he could put in his 2 cents.
It's amazing what can be done with the camera, but that's what Schrader was saying. And well, everybody says it now. You can make a movie with one of these cell phones.
Right.
Why not? The change, the big change that's been happening. The last big change was when we had the serious films, and everybody went to the movies. Television, you couldn't get the serious movies on television. You couldn't.
And you had to learn what it was that you wanted to see, and now first of all we've got a situation where we don't even see the whole thing through. We start a movie and we go to sleep while it's on, and when we wake up, we don't go back to that movie. We now go to a new movie. So the whole idea of getting recommendations doesn't work
So the
anymore.
critic is out of a job.
Yeah, the critic is completely out of a job, because if you like this, here's 10 more things that you're liable to like, and nobody expects you to actually watch them all the way through. You just watch them till you fall asleep. And then when you want to watch something else, you start something new. So it's a completely different approach to choosing what we watch. We don't really need to choose anymore.
It's the 2-hour movie is also falling by the wayside.
Right.
What we've been watching since silent movies was more or less the hour and a half, 2-hour movie that is the staple of all theaters, and they can show it 5 times a day or 6 times a day.
Yes, and now there's content of all different lengths, and nobody expects you to watch the whole thing. You just go on to the next thing.
Right. But this seems like a sea change in Hollywood. If the feature movie is gone, it's.
This is the brilliance of Reed Hastings and
Netflix.
Netflix, and the way Netflix has changed everything.
Yeah. As you said about writers, it's no longer writers. It's what?
Writers' rooms, exactly. The distinctive individual voice, like say the Woody Allen voice, whether it's a Woody Allen masterpiece or a Woody Allen stinker, you hear that voice right away. That's Woody Allen. But when you've got 7 or 8 writers bouncing ideas against one another, there is a homogenization. Is that a word, Bill?
Yes.
It all the idiosyncratic, recognizable thing that we've always responded to, which is writing for the movies. That's gone now.
It seemed like that was so valuable to the movies, that voice.
It seems that way.
The idea of having it and having the continuity of it throughout the film was what gave it its integrity, and now that's shot.
Another thing is the rise of documentaries, which are so they're cheap. They're and there's an endless demand for them. And again, they can be any length, but it's like reality programming.
It reminds me of a phase I've been through probably at least twice in my life where nonfiction moved in as the new. I mean, Tom Wolfe was
Yes.
Arguing for this kind of realism and close to journalism novel, and the arguments that preceded Tom Wolfe, the idea that the novel is dead and the short story is in and the movie is in, or the television is in, and the novel is passe. Well, the novel is not dead. The novel is maybe the novel is in remission to the way the 2-hour movie is. But I don't think either one of them are dead. I think these forms go in and out of style, and depending on what happens. I mean, what happened this time was the pandemic, and
Right.
everybody got used to staying home and watching everything on television. They didn't go to the movies, and now they're not probably going to go back.
Well, they'll go back if something is super exceptional. They'll go back with kids maybe, because it's part of the pleasure of parenting to watch your child laugh with other children. But
We'll also go back.
in
Paul
very
Schrader's piece in the New Yorker.
Yes.
I mean, he says that what's forthcoming is the 40-hour movie.
Mm-hmm.
And, how do you go to that? I remember coming up from Puerto Rico to see Strange Interlude, where you went to see 3 hours of a theater
Right.
piece, and then you went to dinner, and then you came back and
Yes.
saw another 2 hours. It was like a
Yes.
5 or 6 hour evening inside the theater.
Right.
And not counting the dinner. But I mean, 40 hours is anyway. I think that's it's not, you can't dismiss anything anymore. Anything is possible, and I remember talking to Francis Coppola when we were writing some phase of a script of the Cotton Club, and I was talking about Joyce and how nobody could make the movie of Ulysses, and he said, "Why not? Why not?" He said, "You could just make 40 movies or 30 movies or 50 movies. I don't know what number he used. and I couldn't imagine who'll go to them, who'll sit through them, but it might be that is the only way that you're going to see it. I mean,
Or
why
the
would
only-
it be the only way though?
The only way you leave your home to
Yeah, but
why
why
would you go out?
Why can't they bring the 40-hour movie into the house on Netflix? So I don't know what gets people back in the theater. I don't know. I'll talk about books and the fact that they're not looking for books anymore, and Hustler and HUD. You know, I got a movie that's very like The Hustler.
Maybe yes, but that like
It's
you
not being made.
that you have something that maybe there's a remote demand for it. It's not like it once was,
That's
but
right.
maybe.
That's right.
But you know, there are a few things that for one reason or another, in the old mode, let's say in the old just under 2 hours, that for some reason can be done. It's going to be a rare shot. Who needs it? But maybe you have a shot at it.
Well, maybe I do, but I don't know what else to do. I mean, this is what I've written.
Right.
I mean, potentially I can do something else. I'll talk about that in a minute. But it's a finished product. It's there. It's a hell of a good script. I
And
think.
it's old-fashioned in some way, but
in
maybe
some way it's dead now.
that's what I was saying that in a polite way.
Yeah, like the novel is dead, so is the 2-hour movie.
Yeah, there you go.
So where does that leave the novelist and the 2-hour film writer? You're right in the middle of nowhere.
It's not impossible,
And
but it's remote. It's a you know, and that it would be successful enough to make it pay for you, to make it worth your while. You know, not that you're going to make a fortune on it, but that you're going to make something.
well, I never expected to make a fortune on it. Even though I almost did once. But
Now, if you could just get the thing made, that would be
yeah,
enough.
I want the movie to be made.
Understood.
So we'll see what happens. I mean, I'm not going to give up on it. I don't think that. I mean, the pandemic is on the cusp of being beaten, and we don't know what that's going to mean and what's going to happen with them. Nobody knows what's going to happen with the movie business. Nobody can take the temperature of the nation, even though they do every day. It's a different world, and it's going to be whatever it is. And I may have to go and start knocking on Netflix's door, and that may be the next way to go. And start thinking about the way I used to think about becoming a director, becoming a series writer.
Becoming a documentarian.
No, well, I could do that, but this is not a documentary. I mean, I've got a bunch of novels. They can become there's a lot of stuff in there for a series, and it's the way I may have to go from now on. Maybe that's the world has changed radically for me as a writer again. It changes over and over and over. But that's all right. That's the game.
You should live so long. You have lived so long, Bill.
I have lived a long time. If I knew I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself. The idea of Terry Malick using voiceover, and you were working with him on his first movie, Badlands, and you were writing voiceover. But you're saying it is counter to what is the received wisdom of Hollywood's screenwriting Bible. You don't use voiceover. I mean, you make it happen in front of your eyes. And
there's the writing in the script that the actors are saying to each other, but then when you listen to that writing, it, as Terry would say, it wouldn't have the breath of life, and so you kind of lost all of that, and the only actual written stuff happened in the voiceover. That's the way, and then, I mean, in a way, I'm sure he never intended that to be so, but that happened with movie after movie after movie. Sometimes there'd be voiceover for six different characters, and if one of them wasn't a star whose voice you recognized, often you wouldn't really know who was talking.
Right. Now, you were on Badlands, and you did a lot of voiceover on Days of Heaven. But let's go to Badlands first. And what was this? You had something to do with the script on that. But what was it, and what was the script like when you came into the film?
Yeah, I really didn't have that much to do with the script on Badlands. It was much more the voiceover, and
Yeah, but that's what I mean. I mean, that's part of the script. And
well, in a way, yes. Although, in another way, there is written voiceover in the script, but the actual voiceover in the movie is very, very different from that as it evolved.
Oh. What were you? How did you get into the writing anything for the Badlands?
Well, I mean, I started to say Terry and I were best friends in college, and
This was
we
Harvard.
had at Harvard, and we didn't have a glimmer that either one of us was going to wind up in the movie business, or that we would be doing anything together in any business. That all came much later.
What did you think you were going to be doing?
I guess I thought I was going to be a journalist, and I mean that was my ambition up to a certain point, and then I kind of manically expanded that and felt I wanted to get into other areas of the culture, like music and movies and that sort of thing. I mean, it was, well, I mean, you could say it was a manic episode for me.
What did you think, or what did he think, or either of you, or both, that he was going to be doing?
Well, for a while he was a philosopher, and he was probably going to be an academic then, a professor.
Which he became for a while.
Yes, although I mean things. He wasn't happy with that life, and I would say he was casting about for something else he could do, and as it happened, because of a piece that I had written in the New Yorker, I came on to the admissions committee of the American Film Institute, who had just come into a mansion in Beverly Hills and were starting a new program that was going to be a professional training for filmmakers. And Terry really didn't know what he was going to do, and I said, make a little film and apply for that.
You had in the back of your mind that he had the talent to become a movie maker. No?
Yes, I guess.
You didn't tell him to become a journalist.
No, although, our paths kind of crossed. We were journalists at the same time. We were working for the New Yorker magazine at the same time in New York. That was a few years after college.
When, what was the piece, by the way, that got you into that operation?
I wrote a long piece about the movie The Graduate, which was using the movie as a jumping off point to talk about what was happening with youth in say in 1967 when it came out. And as a result of that, George Stevens Jr., who was starting this school at the American Film Institute, hired me to be on the admissions staff. And that was my first trip to California in 1969. It was the week of the Manson murders.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
The Manson murders came like a week after Woodstock. People don't quite put that together.
Oh, I don't remember that. That was that summer. That was when you were talking to Stevens. You said that was Terry Malick was the most likely to succeed that you ever knew of anybody in your life, and but you weren't talking about the movie.
When I said that to George Stevens, I was saying this guy could succeed at whatever he wants to do, and that includes movies. But when I first said that, I wasn't thinking about movies at all. Movies was something that had really not occurred to either of us yet.
No, but this was your beginning in Hollywood. That's the first time you went out there, more or less?
Yes, for
movies.
To be part of making this class that Paul Schrader was also a member of this.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, of maybe 16 or 20 people who had distinguished themselves often at something else and now were interested in movies.
So, well, let's go back to Badlands for a minute, and with the voiceover and your involvement. You're out there at Hollywood now, and how much after your first time out there was Badlands? When was that?
I would say, Terry had been out there maybe 3 years at that point, and he was more or less graduating from the Film Institute, and now was embarking on his first on his first project
So
as
he did go into and he was, out of it came Badlands.
yeah. I mean, as we said, people compared him this as a debut film that he had put together himself. They compared him to Orson Welles, but of course Orson Welles was already a world famous radio celebrity, and he was a recognized genius, whereas Terry completely came out of the blue. Nobody had ever heard of him.
Except you.
Yeah.
Well, what did you do on Badlands? Let's put it that way. I mean, however your involvement, you were out there and he was out
I
there.
wasn't on the set at all. So my involvement was completely in pre-production, and then when the picture was being put together in post-production, and that did have a lot to do with Sissy's voiceover, which kept changing and evolving as the picture was being edited.
Okay. And when you talk about voiceover, how were you writing this? What were you doing? I mean,
It's not really writing it like going home and writing it. I mean, it would be as you're working on something like this. Of course, and I'm sure you know this very well from your own experience. At a certain point, you click in with what the voice sounds like, and now suddenly you can just talk that. You can just get in the groove with it. I know this is something that you've experienced.
yeah, I understand that. And what did you do? I mean, did you record it on tape or what? How did you write this voiceover? I mean, you recorded it at some point. I would say.
Yeah, I mean, Sissy kept coming back and recording it. I mean, this went on. The editing process went on for a long time, and this was an important part of it.
I see.
And something very similar went on in Days of Heaven, and in fact, I say this immodestly. Nobody really knows about it, but there was. It was. In Days of Heaven, when I was in New York recording this stuff, once a week I'd go into the studio with this little girl, Linda Mann. She didn't know how to read, so you couldn't write. It wasn't really writing. It was, I would kind of imitate her voice and talk to her in the studio, and and try to get her started on something. I'd say, I've been thinking about my future. And sometimes there'd be shots in the film that we had in mind that Terry would say, see if we can come up for something where Linda lays her head down on the ground with her ear up against the ground. See if we can come up with something. And Linda says, I could be a mud doctor listening to the sounds of the earth underneath. And so it wasn't writing. It was talking, and it was very laborious. And at a certain point, Terry was ready to give up on it. He felt, like it's taking too long. We'll have a little voiceover from Brooke Adams, who's the older girl, and you know, I felt very strongly that it could work. We could, if we stuck with it and had, you know, we'd had a lot of patience and we needed a little more patience.
So you talked them into it.
I would claim that, yes. And,
Okay.
I mean, and I
And
have
so
never,
what-
I have never claimed this.
What happened? What happened?
Well,
So
we did stick with it, and ultimately, I mean, he became, you know, you could say that was a moment of discouragement, but it took a very, very long time, and you know, there were a few times early on, like there's a long piece of voiceover when the train is coming to disgorge all of the workers from the city who are going to get off, and she goes into a long thing about heaven and hell that, you know, which she was really on a roll with it, and that kind of became a model. But then we never really got her going like that again. It became much more slow and cut and paste and trial and error.
Okay. Did you ever write any script at all for Days of Heaven?
No,
You did not.
no.
So you mainly worked in this voiceover business. That's your.
Well, I was
contribution.
also shooting while the picture was being made. I had like a little film crew that didn't have sound, and sometimes when the main crew was shooting a big tracking shot, say with lots of extras, I would creep around out of their way and shoot little scenes with the extras, and, you know, position them in some way where I could, you know, get the moon in the shot or whatever. That would be like a second camera.
Second unit. Yeah.
But in some cases, it would be real second unit where I would take a bunch of extras and go off to some other place with them and film. You know, I mean, for example, there was the shooting of the scenes with the locusts and the fire went on for weeks and weeks. So I would go off and shoot some little stuff where we were gluing locusts to wheat stalks and then burning them, you know, that sort of thing.
Okay, Jake. Well, thank you very
Thank
much
me.
for all this.
And thank
Chit-chat
you,
and,
you know, as Groucho would say, thank you. Thank you.
My mother thanks you. My father thanks
Yeah.
you. Anyway, that's all, folks.
God love you.